Thank you so much for joining me today as we read through our book, Aven Green Baking Machine. Each night we're going to be reading through some chapters of this wonderful book. So come on, sit back, get comfortable, and let's read.
Chapter 3, Milk Barfy. "Someone's at the door," Mom called across the house in a sing-songy voice. So I knew it was one of my friends. I ran to the entryway, and I peeked through the little window next to the door. It was Emily! I smiled, and she smiled back. Then she had to wait a few minutes while I unlocked the door with my toes. Sometimes it takes a little longer for me to do things with my toes. And that front door lock, well, that's a toughie. Dad keeps saying he's going to replace it with a new one. That's easier for me. But that dude is a slow poke. Then I called out, "You may enter!" So Emily would just let herself in because that lock had already worn out my toes. Emily burst through the door, and we jumped up and down excitedly and sang, "Baking day! It's baking day!" And Emily's squeaky voice made my ears hurt a little. Then Emily put her arm around me, and we ran into the kitchen. She threw her backpack on the top of the kitchen table and started pulling out all the cool baking stuff she'd brought. A special chef's hat, an apron, a tiny wooden spoon that came from her doll stuff, a bunch of canned and boxed stuff, a small baking sheet that looked like it could bake about one cookie, and her sous chef, a stuffed dog named Madame Puffy Pants. A sous chef is a head chef's assistant, and I was definitely the head chef. So really, Madame Puffy Pants was my sous chef. "What are we going to bake first?" Emily asked all excitedly. Just as the doorbell rang, we both squealed and ran to the door. I peeked through the window again and saw Kayla and Sojita standing there. "You may enter," I cried, and they came through the door. We all ran to the kitchen excitedly about the contest. "We can only enter one dessert to the contest," I told them, "which means it has to be the very best out of everything we make today." "Gee, I wonder whose will win," Kayla said, snickering, like she knew exactly whose recipe would win. But spoiler alert, it wasn't going to be hers. We stood around the kitchen table, scanning the supplies everyone brought. Kayla had her own chef's hat, a bag of chocolate chips, and pot holders she knitted herself. But instead of being shapes of squares, they were shapes of blobs. We all turned our attention to Sujita's supplies. "What's that?" Emily asked, pointing at a bag of white powder. "Flour?" Sujita shook her head and smiled shyly. "It's milk powder," she explained. "We have milk," I said. "You don't have to bring that." Sujita's cheeks turned a little pink as she stared down at her milk powder. "My mom thought it might be nice if I brought the ingredients to make a special Indian dessert," she said, running her pink sandal over the kitchen floor and not looking at any of us. "We weren't sure if you had any of the ingredients, so I brought all of them, and we agreed we could each pick one dessert." "Great idea," I announced. Sujita's looked up and smiled. "Let's make it first," I said, and Sujita's excitedly removed the rest of the ingredients from her backpack, telling us what they were as she did so. "This is ghee," she explained, while pulling out the container. "What's ghee?" asked Emily. "It's just butter," said Sujita, but the milk solids had been taken out. Kayla pointed at the bag of powder. "Are those milk solids taken out of there?" Sujita shook her head. "No, that's just milk powder." We all looked at one another with confused faces. Clearly, none of us had any idea what milk solids and milk powder were. Sujita was really smart. Sujita pulled out a small tin and opened it. "This is cardamom," she said. "It's a spice." She passed it around for us to smell. Emily stuck her face so far in it that her nose turned brown. I was pretty sure that nose spices were unsanitary, but I didn't say anything. "That smells superb," I said. "So what are we going to make with all this cool stuff?" Sujita gave us a big smile. "Milk barfy." Again, The three of us looked at one another. Kayla crossed her arms. Did you just say we're making milk barf? Sujita's smile fell. Instantly, she looked down at the floor again. No, it's called milk barfy. I promise it doesn't taste like barf. Emily laughed. We can't make that. I started laughing too. Who would eat something called milk barf? I said. Not me. Sujita looked like she might cry, and then she ran out of the kitchen. And then I felt like I might cry too, because our special baking day was not off to a good start.
Thank you so much for joining me today as we read through our book together as a school, Aven Green Baking Machine. Come back and join us again tomorrow. Have a great night and go Hawks!